Common Gamer here, day 2 of 11 Days of Remembrance. Alright, gotta do some remembrance via veteran, walk up to them and say thank you. I thank them so I could do these videos freely. And alright, okay, the next chapter. Arming for Armageddon, the weapons buildup. Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. All that matters in propaganda, said Hitler on the night of his failed coup attempt in 1923. He knew they were sick of economic, social, and political chaos. Even into the mid-1930s, Hitler continued to debate whether the German people were ready for another war. One of the chief ends of Nazi propaganda was to prepare them for it. When Hitler came to power in 1933, the Nazi message was that though Germany remained the victim of injustice, it was getting stronger. The murder of Vedos and self-sacrifice at the Volk, the materialized German people were celebrated in mass rituals at Nuremberg and elsewhere, but Hitler's propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels ruled that the World War was used as little possibility. No references to conflict was made by the Nazi leaders, even during the Munich crisis in 1938. Of course, propaganda was not enough. German military power also had to be rebuilt. Conscription was introduced in 1935, again contrary to the terms of vigilance, and the same year the certain of the Luftwaffe, or Air Force, was officially announced. The buildup of this was put under the control of Hermann Gottfried, also Hitler's chosen successor. Gottfried was through Van Lorda to microphone. He had that air power would be a crucial factor in any future war between. He had the Mussolini Air Force had terrified the desert tribesmen in Libya and Barbarossa. Aircraft soon began to roll off the Messerschmitt and Heinkel production lines. At the tremendous rate, and German pilots went into action in support of the Spanish fascist general Franco Franco over Barcelona and Girona. Hitler was fortunate too in the act of it. He received from some of the more forward-looking. They spoke of the different tanks would have on the modern battlefield. And particularly and a book on the subject written by a French colonel, Charles de Gaulle, used in conjunction with airstrikes. Panzer divisions could smash enemy resistance and spread the outward distance, currently becoming virtual lightning war, Berserk. At the same time, Hitler set out rebuilding the German Navy, largely scrapped at the end of the Great War, but had no desire to antagonize the British, still prisoners of one of the world's largest fleets, before it was abolished nearly in June 1935. Therefore, he signed the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, but which he was permitted to build a fleet a third the size of the Royal Navy, but he lied about the numbers of ships already under construction, and the British saw no threat in his apparently innocent proposal to build more U-boats, later to become the Scourge of the North Atlantic, and then by all abandoning the limited treaty of London Hitler gave up all. Poster for the Berlin Olympics showing a German Olympian doing a Nazi salute. But in the Olympics, Germany was defeated a lot by the American track star. You should watch the movie Rush. But let's get back to this book. Okay, let's go back. Present of ability by weapons quotes. Britain and France received a nasty shock. They made forensic effort to set the rusty wheels of retirement returning again. However, the French were humped by an old-fashioned industrial system. The British by the efforts of the trending critical. The Russian dominants were also completely outmaneuvered by Hitler's diplomatic offense in 1936. He signed the Anti-Commun Pact with Japan, while in May 1939 he concluded a defense agreement with Mussolini, the so-called Pact of Steel. Meanwhile, the Foreign Minister Joseph von Hitler had signed a secret negotiations with the Nazis, declaring arch-enemy Joseph Stalin. Okay, shall we go on to the next chapter? I think, why not? The shame of appropriate attempt to placate Hitler foe. The history of all times, Roman Empire, British Empire, has provided the interspace expansion can be imminent by only breaking resistance and taking risks, wrote Hitler in Mein Kampf, explaining Germany's need for liberation neither in form nor today. He went on externally, his space been found without an owner. Germany's space problem would have to be solved by 1945. He claimed after that there would be a food crisis. Reading Hitler should have put his crumbers and no doubt about his arms. It was certainly beyond to return Gorby lost in the Treaty of Valence, but the British and French leaders, for their political and psychological reasons already discussed, were prepared to ignore his on Britain territory. Their policy began to certify Hitler politically. They did not believe he was insensible. As well, the overwhelming Reichsland and the Nazis' aid sent to General Franco will he warned steadily to view that Hitler was relatively reasonable being with more or less significant arms. They viewed even a show of strength, but Britain and France were neither unwilling. Warned Hitler explained on the country that the mission work. In November 1937, the Nazis were much encouraged to visit from the senior British politician Lord Halifax, who allowed Hitler to believe that there were no fear-faced Remembrance. Hitler had already been convinced, carried in then from of Oxford University, the Oxford Union. A few months later, the British Foreign Secretary, all presented as government, approved Hitler go home and take an aspirin. He told by Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and Halifax was applauded in his place. In March 1938, when Hitler annexed Austria, he told his own military leaders that lack of opposition to was proof of Western spacelessness, defeat a third country if he attacked it. He meant Czechoslovakia, and he was right. The so-called Munich crisis of September 1938 was the biggest loss yet of the Gagarin policy. Czechoslovakia, a democracy, was almost entirely surrounded by Germany and inhabited by over 3 million German speakers. Hitler spoke of the Southern German as military. Calling his speech, the wall of the German people would force him to intervene tomorrow. Hitler may attack Czechoslovakia. French Foreign Minister Georges Bonnet told the British ambassador to Paris on 10th of September, if he does, France will mobilize at once. She will turn to you saying, we march, do you march with us? What will the answer of Great Britain? Britain's answer was muddled. An order was given for permanent mobilization of the armed forces, but diplomatic criticism was muttered. Then, on the 29th of September, Chamberlain, the French Prime Minister, Edward Dunn, flew to Munich and took the train to Hitler Mountain Retreat at Berlin. Negotiations were chaotic at the normal go-around. Mussolini crowded the leaders into a room filled with officials eating buffet food. The petition was elected shortly after midnight. Chamberlain had been convinced of three things: that for all their devotion, the French would not fight, the allowing Germany to occupy the Sutherland would prevent whole-scale invasion of Czechoslovakia, and that he could rely on Hitler's word to go further. Neither he nor conduct the Czechs with the stroke of a pen. A several chunk of sovereign European country had been handed to totalitarian power. The Germans, who might have been provoked to overthrow Hitler in Britain and France, stood up to him, not let him support the Munich Agreement. Also, Hitler to believe the saber-rattling of political coagulation had been a face-saving device to quit opposition and oppose with Britain has maintained concern with that large number of German tanks had broken down on the way into the Sutherland, with a same defender to Paris. He took the crowds awaiting him to return to a hero's welcome, waving a piece of paper which he answered friends that proposed for peace were better than, but evidence repeatedly took a difference. March 12, 1939, encouraged the Nazis. The Slovaks declared independence from the Czech section of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France had granted the independence of the rest of the country at the Munich Agreement, but Chamberlain told the House of Commons that Slovakian independence can collect on against the elderly Czech press involved to Berlin, which he received verbal instruction from Hitler that fashion a declaration and the fate of Czech people into the hands of the Führer of the German Reich. 3 days later, German troops marched into Prague, and the successful Czech arms industry, with the amount for 10% of the world market, laid in Hitler's hands. But the Führer was not returning. On 21st March, his troops annexed Lithuania, and Chamberlain was compelled to alter his foreign policy. 8 days later, the British Prime Minister offered Poland a promise of support against threat to its independence. Polish Foreign Minister Colonel Blank took the decision to accept Chamberlain's offer, said between two flags of ash of his cigarettes. He would to give Hitler a slap in the face for the demands for the return of Danzig. It was just a diplomatic ammunition. Hitler needed both back and forces to resist invasion. The British came the chief, also Russia, but only the French made any attempt to deal with Stalin for foot on Polish soil. They were afraid that once the Red Army crossed the border, it would never leave. A fear just by events. No longer it existed on its own spirit as some invasion over Czechoslovakia. Stalin had ordered his new foreign minister, Václav Havel, to negotiate a pact with the Germans, by which Poland would be divided equally between the two. Rabutin flew to Moscow to sign the pact on 23rd August. Peace in Europe lasted just 10 more days. Alright, that concludes for that chapter. Alright. If you see a veteran, walk up to them and say thank you, and give them a coffee or whatever. They might be having a bad day, and yeah. Well, this includes this video of the 11 Days of Remembrance, and thank you to the veterans. For you for making me be free, I can make these videos. Thank you.